Hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to talk about behavioral finance. This is Orhan Erdem. Before starting the behavioral finance arguments, let's review what efficient market hypothesis is implying. Efficient market hypothesis has three implications. The first one says prices are correct, which implies again that there can't be any bubbles. The second one is saying that the investors are rational. And the third one says nobody can beat the market systematically. The first two has really serious arguments against it. In the previous videos about market efficiency, I reviewed these arguments. Here I will start with the definition of bubble that Professor Schiller from Yale University proposed. And then I will switch to behavioral finance theory, which proposes alternative hypotheses to explain the anomalies and the problems related to efficient market hypothesis. Okay, so this bubble definition was made by Professor Schiller from Yale University, Bob Schiller. I think it was in 2005 or 2006. So when you read definition, it doesn't talk about any economic phenomenon. Okay, it doesn't talk about demand. It doesn't talk about supply or any kind of externality. It says a bubble is a situation in which news of price increases spurs investor enthusiasm, which spreads by psychological contagion from person to person in the process of amplifying stories that might justify the price increase and bringing in a larger and larger class of investors who, despite doubts about the real value of the investment, are drawn to it partly through envy of others' successes and partly through gamblers' excitement. So please pay attention to these red words. So these red words are, as you can see, investor enthusiasm, psychological contagion, amplifying stories, envy of others, and gamblers' excitement. They have nothing to do with economy or finance fundamentals. They are mostly some emotions or psychological phenomenon. The bubble can be defined by these phenomena, like psychological phenomena, emotions, sensations, gamblers' excitement, etc. So what I'm trying to say here is bubbles are something that can be defined using other fields, other disciplines' arguments. When we are talking about finance, we should benefit from other fields, we should benefit from other disciplines in order to define what's going on in finance. It's not a mathematical phenomena. So bubble has something to do with psychology, emotions, sensations, etc. So this is the fundamental thing of behavioral finance, maybe mixed of psychology and finance. So to the right, you see a history of a classical bubble from Kinderberger. Okay, so the bigger part of behavioral finance is it questions the rationality of investors. Benjamin Graham once says the investor's chief problem and even his worst enemy is likely to be himself. And another fact of market folklore says there are three factors that influence the market: fear, greed, and greed. So here, these quotes, they are emphasizing non-financial, non-mathematical, non-rational phenomena which affects investors' decisions. So that's what behavioral finance is all about. Richard Feynman, who has a Nobel Prize in physics, once said, "Imagine how harder physics would be if electrons had feelings." What I'm trying to say here is financial markets were not characterized by rational investors. Instead, there's widespread deception, manipulation, and irrational agents. In finance, we have electrons with feelings which are humans. So we have like millions of people who has feelings, emotions, sensations which affect their financial decisions. And it's very hard to define the market without those phenomena. So this is basically what behavioral finance says. On the one hand, we have rational man, which are perfect human being. On the other hand, we have Homer Simpson, who has tons of temptations. So he succumbs to temptation. He has weaknesses. He has irrationalities, etc. So that's what behavioral finance is about. So behavioral finance is saying that humans are normal. They have problems. They have biases. They have weaknesses. Let's review those weaknesses one by one, and then let's talk about behavioral finance theories. So let's begin. First, define what behavioral finance is. So behavioral finance is an area of research that attempts to understand and explain how reasoning errors influence investors' decisions and market prices. Much of behavioral finance research are from the research in the area of psychology. Let's emphasize this once again. Let's talk about prospectory, which is maybe the most important theory of behavioral finance. So in 1979, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky developed their prospectory, which sets the basis for characteristics of human heuristics. So it has three basic arguments. I'm going to cover the first one and the third one. in a non-theoretical way. Let's review this example. It's called a loss experiment. You have $300 as a start, and then you are supposed to choose either A or B. A is $100 cash, and B is a lottery, and that lottery is just like tossing a coin, maybe. So if it's heads, you are going to receive nothing, and it's tails, you are going to receive $200, and you are supposed to choose A or B. Think about it first before proceeding the lecture. Either choose A or B. Most people choose A just because it's for sure it's gain. So this is an experiment that was done by several researchers. Here comes the second question. You have $500 and you are supposed to choose a loss. Okay, either you are going to choose $100 loss or a lottery. A lottery is again tossing a coin. If it is heads, you are going to lose $200. If it is tail, then you are going to lose nothing. Again, most people here chose B just because instead of having a loss, sure loss, it's the lottery. Maybe you might have zero loss. It's just a probability. So in the first question, most people chooses A. In the second question, most people chooses B. But in fact, those two questions are exactly the same questions. So here's the summary. So you have $300 as start. If you choose like $100 sure gain, you will end up with $400. Okay, just because you had $300 as start plus 100, that makes 400. And then it's a lottery, 50% probability you have $200 with 50% of 0-100K, and then this means that you are going to end up with either $500 or $300. So this was the gain question, the very first question I asked you. In the second question, it's you have $500, and then A is sure loss, which will make you end up with $400. So 500 minus 100, it makes $400. If you just like review the second one, the lottery, you'll end up with either $300 or $500. So what I'm trying to say here is both questions, you will either end up with $400 gain or a lottery, which gives you 500 or 300. They are basically the same question. Why most people chose A here but B here? So even though A's are the same and B's are the same. The answer is this is called loss aversion. This question, the very first question, was framed with gain, and the second question was framed with loss. So in the first question, you would receive gains. In the second question, you would receive losses. So when there is a probable toss, people are loss averse. So people hate loss more than they like gains. So this is called loss aversion. Even though the scenarios are the same, people hate loss. One implication is this: in a grocery store in Washington, D.C. started offering 5-cent bonuses for customers bringing reusable bags, and then most people did not even care for it. But Aldi, they charge 5 cents. They charge 5 cents. Most of people, they bring their bags, okay? Just because there is bonus here, Aldi charges. So Aldi is a kind of loss case, and this grocery store is a kind of bonus case or gain case. People hate loss more than they like gains, okay? The difference might be even top. Okay, the other argument is, so this was the first argument of prospect theory. People hate loss. That's why they kind of hesitate when they hear stocks, when they buy stocks or any kind of investments. When those investments are in negative, even they are losing, they hate loss. That's why they hesitate to sell their shares when they're in loss. They are expecting that the prices will come back and they are going to make money, which might not be even possible for years, but still they don't sell it. The reference point is the second assertion, prospectory. It would be good to explain this argument by an example. So if you drink iced tea after hot tea, you will feel probably colder than if you drank iced tea after having an ice cream. Okay, so the first thing is after hot tea, after cold tea, this is called reference point. So if your reference point was tea, hot tea, then you will feel colder, okay? This is due to the reference point of taste buds in your mouth, okay? People also have such mental reference points when they are dealing with money. If you regularly receive $2,000 as a tax refund each year, and this year you receive $1,500, you will feel disappointed. If in the previous years you received $1,000, this year's $1,500 would make you happier. So let's frame this hot tea with $2,000. So if every year you receive $4,000 and this year you received $1,500, you will feel disappointed. What if every year you receive $1,000 and this year you receive $1,500? Okay, you will be happy. Even though in both cases your money is $1,500, you will feel happier in the first case. So that's called a reference point in prospect theory. So this theory was asserted 1979, but mostly people did not care about it too much in those years. So we had to wait for a couple of decades in order to make sense all of those arguments. So implications of loss aversion is people are reluctant to sell a security after it has decreased in value, and sell stocks with gains more frequently than stocks with losses. And we are talking about behavioral finance. We should talk about the anomalies of humans, which kind of shows their level of irrationality. One of those biases, we call them biases in behavioral finance, those anomalies, is called availability bias. Availability bias can be understood by looking at the following example. The question is, which one is higher? So number of words starting with R or number of words whose third letter is R. So even though one of them is like 3 times higher than the other one, it's very easy to remember the things in familiar ways. So we tend to think in examples, and we remember some things much more easily than others. So in this case, thinking of things in familiar ways, like the words starting with R, is very easy. So like radio, for example, or Romeo, it's a lot easier than new ways. So the words whose third letter is R, it's a little bit like a new way, which we are not familiar with. That's why even though number of words whose third letter is R is 3 times higher than the first one, so this one is 3 times higher than the first one, it's easy to remember words in familiar ways, okay, like radio, for example. This is called availability bias. Okay, availability bias is the tendency to think in examples and in things which are familiar and easy. Okay, so this kind of causes us to come up with a bad assessment of risk. So its implication is, if something happens in the past, it's very easy to remember that. Okay, so like a car accident. So people think that car accidents or terrorism events are kind of much more, they cause much more death than others, but that's not the case. So cancer kills much more than any kind of killing event, like terrorism event or suicide, homicides, they're combined. So, but people like cancer death numbers are just like basically statistics, which are boring. Okay, so that's not something available to us, and that's why we tend to think that number of deaths caused by any kind of terrorist events are higher than cancer. So what's the implication in finance? Implication in finance is we tend to remember, for example, whenever we won, whenever we make money, okay, we tend to forget that we lost, or we tend to forget that our return was negative. So this is called availability bias. There is another bias called conformity, which was shown by Ash in 1951. So he asked people which of the comparison lines in the right has the same length with the standard line on the left. Okay, so when this question asked alone to people, 99% of the people get this correct. The answer is 2. But if everybody in the class, so say this is the guy who is being tested, so if everybody in the class says that the answer is 3, so you kind of tend to conform. Okay, so when asking groups, so even though those guys kind of mislead you, when asking groups, like 37% of the responses were confirming. So you tend to say that it's 3 if they all say that that's 3. So before proceeding, let me show you a very common example in psychology, which is called elevator experiment.
So you walk into an elevator and naturally you turn and face the door, right? It's just what we do without even thinking. All right. In the blue t-shirt, that is Nadia. She is an innocent passerby. Has nothing to do with this. Everybody else in that elevator, they all work for Would You Fall For That. They are all in on the experiment. They are all purposefully facing the wrong way. Nadia is facing the front. You can just see the back of her head, wearing the blue t-shirt. That's Nadia. Nadia. She is facing the front of the elevator like a normal human being. Everybody else is facing the back.
That's true.
We're playing this to you in real time, no editing, as it actually happened. Okay, floor 2. Rebecca gets off, Emily gets on, she also works for us. We're swapping people in and out to reinforce the behavior. Emily's acting like it's the most normal. Oh, Nadia's turned. Okay, her bag is slipping off her shoulder. She's nervously playing with it.
Yeah.
Nadia's now halfway round. Will she go any further? Emily gets off, Mike gets on. Again, Mike works for the show. Presses his button, faces the back like it's the most normal thing in the world, like he does it every day. Nadia is really feeling the pressure right now.
I'm not going to see anyone else.
Isn't he outside?
Scott's making some small talk.
He was in celebrity rehab, I think.
Oh.
Yeah.
She's looking towards the back of the elevator, as everybody else is. Floor 4.
I love the guy.
4th floor, Mike gets off. Lauren gets on. Lauren also works for us. She's in. Oh, and Nadia has gone. The 4th floor, Nadia has turned all the way around. She's looking at the back of the elevator. That is not normal human behavior. Nadia is looking at the back of the elevator purely because everybody else is. Okay, you've seen it in real time. Let's play that for you again in fast forward. Nadia, turning.
So this video illustrates what we call herd mentality, which is very common in financial markets, but it might not be easy to find this word or this vocabulary in rational settings. So let me illustrate this with a real life example from 2007, like global Great Recession. So on July 9th, 2007, Citigroup CEO Chuck Prince was quoted in an interview with the Financial Times, and then he was asked why they distributed those ninja loans. Okay, let me write it down here. So it's ninja loans. It stands for no incomes, no jobs or assets. So it was given to people who doesn't have any income, any jobs or assets. Okay, so it was very risky mortgage, and it was considered under the general name of subprime. Okay, so one of subprime mortgages was called a ninja loan. It was given to people with no income, no jobs or assets. So like one of the distributor of these ninja loans was Citigroup, and its CEO Chuck Prince was asked by a Financial Times reporter why they funded people with those kind of mortgages, and he said, as long as the music is playing, you've got to get up and dance. We are still dancing. So even though he had to resign 4 months later, this shows the motivation behind aggressive lending. So everybody is doing the same thing, thinking that if I stop, I will lose my share from the market. Okay, so this was what CEOs were thinking. While many customers were running to get a loan, banks and financial institutions were doing the same thing on the other side of the table. So they were rushing to grant loans, decreasing lending standards. Okay, so it's like kind of like herding mentality. So if you don't give this loan, another bank will get your market share. So it's nothing but the herding mentality. Another bias which we see in financial markets is called overconfidence. Overconfidence might be defined in various ways. So it might be defined as the difference between what you actually know or do and how much you actually know or do. Okay, psychologists Dan Moore or Paul Healy, they defined overconfidence as the overestimation of one's actual ability, performance, level of control, or chance of success. And this version of overconfidence undermines several supposed irrational thinking. Like Wesleyan University professor Scott Plous, for example, he points out to the importance of overconfidence as follows. So he said, like, no problem in judgment and decision making is more prevalent and more potentially catastrophic than overconfidence. So let me illustrate this overconfidence by the following cases. So 84% of the Frenchmen feel that they are better than average lovers. So 84% better than average. 60% of Swiss people claim that they are in the 20% quintile of best drivers, so which is theoretically impossible. So quintile is, you divide this whole list of people into 5 groups. So this is going to be the best 20% quintile. It's impossible to have 60% of the people in the top 20% quintile, so no way. But people think that they are there just because they kind of exaggerate their knowledge. So some psychologists cite overconfidence bias behind the explosion of US Space Shuttle Challenger and Pearl Harbor case in World War II. These are some common phenomena that we encounter in life. In finance, people overtrade because they think that they have superior knowledge and skill on trading. So we see in like overtrading in financial markets, which is people buying and selling more than they are supposed to do. And I say supposed to do just because if markets are efficient, you do not need to trade too much, okay, because we can't beat the market, but people don't care this, they overtrade. So this is one of the implications of overconfidence. And people, men are subject to more overconfidence. That's another fact that we observe in the markets, which I will show you in a moment. A couple of results of research, my own research. These are some examples of overconfidence from the history. Okay, so a couple of other biases. In all of these like individual biases, my point is to show you that people have irrational behaviors. Okay. I'm not saying that people are always irrational, but we tend to show irrational behavior, okay, from time to time. So we can't say that humans are 100% rational. Okay, so this is another example. I think it was by Kahneman again. So there was a roulette which was biased to only come up with the numbers 10 or 65. So two groups of people came in front of the roulette one by one, and then they are asked to turn the roulette, okay? And then after they turn the roulette, they are asked this question, and they explicitly said that they're explicitly told that this question has nothing to do with the roulette. And that question was, what percentage of countries in Africa are members of the United Nations? In the first group, so there are two groups. In the first group, the roulette is biased to 10. In the second group, the roulette is biased to 65. So average estimate of those that got the number 10 was 25%. So their answer was 25% to the question. And the average percent of those who rolled the number 65 was 45%. So what's going on here is their brain is anchored by the number they saw in the roulette, okay? There is a really good movie, Focus, by Will Smith, which illustrates this anchoring point. Okay, here are a couple of other examples. So when people are asked to calculate this operation, they tend to underestimate the value, and then here they tend to overestimate the value, because here the first number they see is just little numbers. Here the first numbers they see are really large numbers, and people who are asked the first operation, was the average of their answers was 512, and then in second case it's 2250, even though the questions are exactly the same and answer is exactly the same. So they tend to overestimate, underestimate, or underestimate depending on the first number they see, which we call anchor again. Another bias is called framing. So this experiment was done like almost 40-50 years ago. Loftus simulated an experiment. People are, they watch a little short video of car crash, and then they're asked this question about how fast were the cars going when they point each other. So we just like interchangeably put different words here and then try to see what's going on. Here's the list of the words they see. So if that question is framed with smashed, the answer came out to be 41 miles per hour. If that word is changed to be contacted, even though the question is exactly the same, I just changed the word, okay? And then they, again, like the average is very low. So the average is highest when the question is framed with smash. The average is lowest when the question is framed with contacted. So this is called framing. So even though everybody watched the same video, their answer changed due to the question they are asked. So this is called framing. Moreover, smashed, so people who see the word smashed, the smashed question caused people to be more likely to tell that they saw broken glass in the accident scene. Okay, so there's like 32% of the people who solved the word smash said that they solved broken glasses versus, so 32% here in the smashed case and 14% in the contacted case say that they solved broken glass. Okay, so the last bias I would like to mention you is called mental accounting. So let's watch this video to talk about that, which illustrates mental accounting very good. So let's watch it.
I'll tell you a story about Dusty.
I know what you're going to tell. You're going to tell about the money you lent me. I know you're going to tell this fucking
Such
story.
a funny story, I think. I go over to Dusty's little apartment in Pasadena one time, and he says, hey, can you loan me some money? Yeah. My wife was working. I wasn't working, but my wife was working. So
We both lived
I
off
said, how
the
much you need? He said, I don't know, $5 or whatever. And
More than that.
So I go into his kitchen, and he has these mason jars up on a ledge. And one of them says rent, one of them says entertainment, one says books, one says about 5 of them, all
Phone,
labeled.
electric.
And they all had money in it, except the one that said food. And that didn't happen to have any money. So I said to him, well, you don't need any money, you got money. He says, I can't take the money out of the other jars. I think your mom probably told you that was the way
right.
to
That's right. Or my father.
borrow money from Gentiles.
That's right. No, and don't pay them back.
Okay, mental accounting is about having those mental jars. Okay, some people, they borrow using their credit cards even though they have money, they have cash in their savings account. Okay, savings account, generally they offer you an interest rate which is far lower than credit cards charge you. So this is kind of mental accounting. So you put credit cards on the right side of your brain, for example, and then you put your savings account on the left side of your brain, so you don't want to mix them up. But in reality, you should use your savings account if you have money instead of using borrowing using credit cards, which is far higher than savings account interest rate. Okay, so before finishing this class, I would like to share you a couple of results from my research. This is due to an article called Trading Puzzling Trade. We showed that using 20,000 investors from Borsa Istanbul, Istanbul Stock Exchange, we showed a couple of really interesting behavioral biases that real investors have. First one is portfolio diversification. So out of 20,000 people, 1,135 people, investors, hold only one stock in his portfolio or her portfolio for 2 years. One investor, in fact, has like 284 stocks. So even though finance says that diversification really decreasing risk, like 1,000 people has only one stock. And then you see the number of stocks on the x-axis and the frequency. So 37% of the people have 2 or less, and almost 70% of people, when you combining those two columns, 70% of the people has less than 4 or more stocks. So people do not diversify at all in general. So we have 20,000 people, 20,000 investors, out of which is almost 16,000 are men, and then almost 3,000 are women. So we calculated their average turnover, which is kind of indication of trading volume. Men's trading volume is far higher than women, and then median is also far higher than women, so men trade more. And then average return, please pay attention to average return. So in general, everybody, so the first column is everybody, so it's like all individuals. Second column is women, and third column is men. So when you look at the mean, in general, so this is in general, the average is negative, which means that individuals, they lose money. But more interestingly, men lose more than women. So this number, this number is higher than that number, almost 2 times. Okay, it's twice. So bottom line is men trade more and then lose more. Let me elaborate this point a little bit more. So we divided like this 20,000 people into 5 categories depending on their trading volume. So this is the lowest trading people, I mean, trading volume is lowest. This is the highest trading volume. So these guys in the fifth category, so that there are 5 categories here. So the fifth category trade, their trading volume is the highest. First category is trading volume is the lowest, okay? And the column they represents their adjusted return, okay? Market adjusted return, which means their return minus the market return, okay? So the fifth category, okay, whose trading volume is the highest, loses the highest, okay? First category, whose trading volume is the lowest, they lose the lowest, okay? The bottom line is when you trade more, you lose more, okay? So it's almost linearly increasing, okay? Trading more people lose more, trading low people lose less. So it basically shows that when you trade more, you lose more. Now, this is Warren Buffett called this fourth law of motion. As you might know, Sir Isaac Newton, he lost a fortune in the stock market, and he said, I can calculate the movement of stars, but not the madness of man, not me. Warren Buffett said, if Isaac Newton had not been traumatized by his loss, South Sea bubble, he might well have gone to discover the fourth law of motion. For investors as a whole, returns decrease as motion increases. So it's basically what I'm saying. Okay, if you trade more, which is motion, you lose more. So men trade more, their turnover is basically an indication of trading volume. They trade more, they lose more. From University of California, Berkeley. So he wrote a paper with this title, Boys Will Boys, and then he basically showed more or less the same results about American investors. Well, this is all about behavioral finance. I hope you enjoyed the class. If you are interested in behavioral finance, if you want to read more, so these might be my recommendations. All of these books are about behavioral finance and economics, and they are really good to read, easy to read, and easy to understand books. Hope to see you in the next classes.